You ever walk into a place and feel like the whole room just freezes around you? Yeah, that was Maddie Rowan, 8 years old, stepping through the heavy double doors of the Sequoia County Courthouse, like someone had pushed her into a refrigerator. Not a normal cold, either. This was that sharp, metallic kind of cold, the kind that cuts, the kind you feel behind your ribs. And the light, God, the light, was way too bright, clinical, harsh, like it wasn't illuminating the room so much as slicing it open. It bounced off the white walls and polished floor and landed right on her tiny face, making her blink too fast, like a little bird dragged out of its nest before sunrise. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every head turning, and Maddie, she just stood there, thin arms locked to her sides, shoulders pulled in so tight you'd think she was trying to fold herself into nothing. Her sneakers barely made a sound on the marble, but somehow each step echoed anyway. And the eyes, Jesus, the eyes. Grown-up eyes can be mean without even trying, you know? They scanned her up and down like airport machines. Some looked at her with pity, some with judgment, some with that poor kid probably imagined it expression adults wear when they don't want the truth. And Maddie felt all of it, all at once, like she'd swallowed a handful of stones. Coda walked beside her, shoulder brushing her thigh, not pushing, not pulling, just there. A wall of fur and muscle and steady breathing. Retired K9, gray around the muzzle, scars hidden beneath that thick sable coat. He moved like he'd seen 100 rooms like this before, and wasn't scared of a single one. But Maddie? She was shaking. Not the obvious kind. No. This was the tiny, subtle tremble that starts in your fingers and spreads until even your eyelashes feel unsteady. And then up. Because life likes making terrible moments even worse. Victor Marlowe stood up. Victor Marlowe. A name that sounded expensive even before you saw the man wearing it. Tailored suit, perfect hair, teeth too white, smile too smooth. A lawyer who could talk the sun into setting twice. Everybody said he was charming. Charming. Yeah, if you didn't mind the kind of charm that snaps like a trap. He moved toward Maddie with that fake, gentle walk he used when cameras were watching. Except, there weren't any cameras today. Just people. And still he performed. Because men like him don't know how not to. He crouched to her height, hands resting lightly on his knees. From afar, he looked like he was being nice. Up close, it was something else entirely. "Hey there, Maddie," he said, smiling like a serpent pretending to be a teddy bear. "Rough morning, huh?" She didn't answer, couldn't. Her throat had closed to the size of a straw. Victor leaned closer, too close, and the fake softness vanished. Not slowly, not subtly, just gone. His voice dropped to a whisper that felt like a razor slipping under her skin. "You open that mouth of yours," he smiled, The smile of a man who enjoyed this. And that dog is gone. Forever. You got that? Gone. Forever. The words hit her like a punch. Her whole body locked. Her lungs forgot what air was. Her hands reached for Coda's fur, but froze halfway. And Coda, sweet old Coda, he didn't growl, didn't bark, didn't show teeth. He just stared. Right at Victor Marlowe. No ear flick, no tail twitch, no shift in posture. But his eyes, oh man, his eyes, they went sharp, focused, predatory, the way only a retired K9 who's seen monsters before can manage. Victor pretended not to notice, but you could see the moment he felt it, the flicker in his gaze, the hitch in his breath, the way he straightened his cuff back a little too fast. He stepped away, cleared his throat, smoothed his jacket, like nothing had happened. But something had, something big, something electric, something humming under the benches like a warning drum. Maddie stood stiff as sticks, heart hammering like it wanted out of her chest. She clutched the sleeve of her denim jacket, knuckles turning white. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. It was that kind of fear, the kind that dries everything up, the kind that makes you silent. Because if you make a sound, even a small one, you think the whole world might fall apart. Coda sat closer. His shoulder nudged her leg, warm and steady, reminding her she wasn't alone. She leaned into him, just a little, barely noticeable, but it was all she had. Meanwhile, Victor Marlowe slid back into his seat with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. Like he'd already cracked the child in half. Like the trial was just a formality now. But Coda didn't look away from him. Not once. And if someone had been watching closely, really watching, they might have noticed the shepherd's chest expand a little more than usual. Muscles coiling under fur. Eyes locked like he was memorizing every breath Victor took. Because Coda heard the threat. And unlike Maddie, he wasn't scared into silence. He was waiting. And sometimes, silence is the loudest warning in the world. If the courtroom felt cold, then the room Maddie sat in now, well, it wasn't just cold. It was empty. A different kind of empty. Like all the air had been sucked out and replaced with this strange, quiet pressure that sat heavy on her chest. The therapy room at Redwood Hill Precinct didn't look scary on paper. Beige walls, soft lights, a few posters about feelings that nobody ever really read. But sometimes, a room doesn't need sharp corners or bad lighting to hurt. Sometimes, the hurt comes from the silence inside it. And Maddie had a lot of silence. She'd been carrying it since Caleb night. People called it that now, whispered it in hallways, wrote it on folders. The incident, the Rowan case, the night everything went wrong. But to Maddie, it was just the night her whole world cracked. She hadn't spoken a word since. And every adult, every cop, every doctor, every counselor kept trying to poke that silence like it was a puzzle they could solve if they just pushed hard enough. Sweetheart, can you tell us what you saw? Was it dark? Maybe you got confused? Trauma can make memories funny, honey. Kids misunderstand all the time. There it was. That word. Kids. Like being small automatically meant being wrong. The therapist today, Dr. Fox, a woman with kind eyes but a tired voice, sat across from her with a clipboard resting on crossed legs. She didn't look mean, most of them didn't. That didn't make it easier. So, Maddie, Dr. Fox said gently, do you remember what we talked about last week? About how speaking your feelings can help you feel safe? Maddie's feet swung slowly under the chair. Not because she was calm, but because she didn't know where else to put the fear. Her sneakers brushed the tile in tiny, shaky arcs. She didn't answer, didn't even look up. Dr. Fox tried again, softer. It's okay if you feel scared. You can nod if that's easier. Did something happen that night that made you afraid? Maddie tugged at her hoodie sleeve, twisting the fabric. Her throat tightened, not like before crying, but like a heavy hand had been placed right on her voice box and refused to let go. Dr. Fox sighed, not annoyed, just defeated. This must feel really big for you, huh? She murmured. And you must feel very alone. Alone. Yeah. That was the word nobody said, but everybody meant. It wasn't that Maddie didn't want to speak. It was that speaking felt pointless. Because adults had already decided the truth. The cops thought she mixed things up. The doctors blamed trauma hallucinations. Neighbors whispered, "Poor girl, she must have imagined it." Kids exaggerate. You know how children are. Every time Maddie heard them, whether she was meant to or not, it pushed her deeper into that dark, quiet place inside her. The place where she curled up around her memories like they were fragile things only she understood. And honestly, the therapy room didn't help. Every session felt the same. Questions she couldn't answer. Expectations she couldn't meet. Grown-ups leaning in with their fake soft voices, trying to coax something out of her she wasn't ready to give. Can you draw how you felt? Can you show me with your hands? Can you tell me yes or no? It all blurred together. And Maddie sat there, week after week, shrinking smaller and smaller until she felt like a dot in the chair. A dot nobody could hear. A dot nobody wanted to hear. Because hearing her would mean believing her. And believing her would mean facing something terrifying. Her silence wasn't an accident. Wasn't stubbornness. Wasn't even fear anymore. It was hopelessness. A slow, heavy hopelessness that crawled into her bones every time someone said she was wrong, or confused, or too young to understand. Her eyes drifted to the tiny rectangular window high on the wall. Not big enough to see much, just a slice of gray sky and the top of a pine tree. But she stared at it anyway. It was the only thing in the room that didn't expect anything from her. You know, Dr. Fox said softly, your dad, Caleb, he told a very different story. And some people think maybe... Maddie flinched. Not a tiny flinch, A full-body jolt like someone had yanked an invisible string. Dr. Fox froze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have said that." But the damage was done. It wasn't just the memories she avoided. It was the disbelief. Every time someone doubted her, even gently, it opened the same wound. If everyone thinks you're wrong, maybe you are. And if you are, maybe you deserved it. That was the part nobody understood. Her silence wasn't about fear. It was about shame. A deep, choking shame planted by people who were supposed to protect her. The session dragged another 20 minutes. 20 minutes of quiet questions and quieter non-answers. 20 minutes of waiting for a miracle that never came. When Dr. Fox closed her notebook with a soft thump, Maddie felt something inside her tighten even more, as if the room itself confirmed it. She wasn't someone worth believing. But out in the hallway, someone was waiting. Someone who listened without expecting her to perform. Someone who didn't need words to understand her. Someone with brown eyes, a battle-worn heart, and a loyalty that didn't crack under anyone's doubt. Coda. And Maddie, who hadn't spoken in months, felt her fingers twitch at the thought of him. Not because she was ready to talk, but because for the first time all day, she remembered what it felt like to not be entirely alone. And honestly, after everything that happened in that therapy room the day before, you'd think Maddie couldn't sink any deeper into herself. But, well, she did. Kids don't fall all at once. They drift downward, inch by inch, until one day they realize they're sitting at the bottom of a well no one believes even exists. But the next morning, yeah, that morning, something changed. It was early, like way early. That weird time when the sun isn't fully awake and the world feels softer, quieter, like it's tiptoeing. Light spilled through the high window in thin, warm bars, like someone had painted gold stripes on the concrete. Maddie sat in the same chair as always, knees together, hands curled into her sleeves, hair falling forward like a curtain she could hide behind. The silence was the same too, heavy, familiar, something she'd gotten used to carrying. But then, the door opened. Not in that sudden, harsh way people rush between tasks. No. This door opened slow, gentle, like whoever stood behind it didn't want to scare the air in the room. Sergeant Blake Huxley stepped inside first. Big guy, broad shoulders, that tired but kind cop look. A man who'd seen too much, but still hadn't let the world rot him from the inside. He held the door with one hand, and with the other, he guided in the only creature Maddie trusted in the entire building. Coda. The old German shepherd trotted forward with a calm, steady gait. Not excited, not nervous. Just sure. Like he'd already judged the room and decided Maddie was the only person that mattered right now. His nails clicked softly on the floor, a slow rhythm louder in Maddie's chest than her own heartbeat. Huxley gave her a small smile, not forced, The kind that says, "Hey, kid, I don't expect anything from you. Just breathe. You two can sit together today," he said quietly. Then he stepped back, didn't hover, didn't push. Just let them be. Coda didn't wait for permission. He circled once, a warm cloud of fur, and lowered himself beside Maddie's chair. Not in front of her, not turned away. Right next to her thigh. A perfect shield. And the way he laid down, man, that was something. It wasn't casual, it wasn't sloppy, it was intentional. Like he was saying, "I'm here, try and move me." Maddie glanced down, just a flick of her eyes, barely noticeable, but enough to confirm he was real. Her breath caught. You could see her whole body hitch, like someone pressed pause on her fear for half a second. Coda exhaled, slow, deep, steady. A sound like soft waves hitting a quiet shore. And something in Maddie cracked. Not broken, cracked. More like released. She lowered one hand from her sleeve, fingers trembling, reaching like she was approaching fire. But she kept going, inch by fragile inch, until her fingertips brushed the fur on Coda's back. You ever see a kid touch hope for the first time? It's tiny, quiet, barely there, but it feels huge. Her hand settled, shaky at first, then resting, then sinking a little deeper into his thick coat. And Coda? He didn't even look at her. That's what got her. He didn't make a big deal of it, didn't move a muscle, just stayed, breathing slow, grounding her without asking for anything. His breaths deepened. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And Maddie's body slowly began to follow. Her shoulders dropped. Her spine eased. Her fingers curled. Not out of fear, but something closer to trust. In that moment, his breathing became her borrowed heartbeat, like she couldn't find her own, so she used his. Dr. Fox watched from the corner, quiet. Still, she didn't dare speak. Moments like this fall apart if someone tries to name them. Maddie leaned forward an inch, just enough for her hair to brush Coda's shoulder. Not a hug, not yet, but closer than she'd been with anyone in months. A soft warmth washed over her face. Not dramatic, just warmth. A reminder she wasn't drifting alone in the dark. And the wild part? Coda seemed to know exactly how much space she needed. Not too close, not too far. Just enough. Her breathing synced with his. Her trembling slowed. The crushing loneliness loosened its grip. For the first time since Caleb night, Maddie let her eyes close. Not in fear, but in relief. She didn't speak. Didn't have to. Coda spoke for her in the way only dogs can. Without words, without conditions, without needing her to explain her pain. Just by staying. Just by breathing for her when she couldn't breathe on her own. And watching that tiny hand resting on that big old dog's back. It felt like watching a bridge being built between two places that had never touched before. A broken child, a retired warrior. Two souls stitched together by a single quiet moment. So let me ask you this. A. Do you believe moments like that can save a child? B. Do you think it's just dogs being dogs? C. Or have you ever had a moment like that with your own pet? If the therapy room was where Maddie first touched hope, then the little training yard behind Precinct 47, well, that was where hope finally pushed back. It happened the next afternoon. Sunlight was softer than usual, that warm, late-day glow that makes everything feel a little less sharp. The yard wasn't big, just a cracked stretch of concrete, a stubborn patch of grass, and a chain-link fence buzzing when the wind hit it right. Sergeant Blake Huxley walked out first, hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure this was going to work, but figured, hey, we've tried worse ideas. Behind him, Maddie followed. Tiny, hesitant steps, like each one needed its own permission slip. And right next to her, always, was Coda, matching her pace, matching her energy, matching her breathing. Okay, kiddo, Huxley said, nodding toward the open space. We're going to try something simple today. Nothing crazy. Just you, Coda, and one word. Maddie blinked up at him from behind her hair. Not scared. Just tentative. Like she'd forgotten how to exist anywhere that wasn't a therapy chair. Huxley crouched beside Coda and gave the dog's shoulder a firm pat. He knows the cue, he said softly. He just needs to hear it from you. From you. Those two words alone were heavy enough to tilt Maddie's world sideways. Coda sat patiently, tail brushing the concrete in slow, steady sweeps, ears perked just enough to show he was listening. Maddie stared at him, then at Huxley, then back, her breath catching in those tiny, silent hitching beats. Here's the deal, Huxley said, rubbing the back of his neck. We'll keep it easy. Just one word. Sit. That's it. He knows it better than he knows my birthday. Maddie didn't laugh, but her lips twitched. And honestly, that alone felt like a win. Huxley stepped back, giving her space. You don't have to shout, he added. Barely a whisper's fine, just enough for him to know you're talking to him. Maddie's hands curled, uncurled, curled again. Her chest rose, fell, rose again. It wasn't just a command. It was a mountain disguised as a syllable. Maddie, Huxley said gently, whatever happens, you're safe. He listens to you. He nodded at Coda, more than he listens to any of us. Coda's eyes locked onto hers, warm, steady, patient, like he already knew what was coming. Maddie took one tiny step closer, then another. Coda didn't move. A soft breeze swept through the yard. The smell of pine drifted over the fence. A paper cup rolled behind them, tapping the concrete in a slow tap. Tap, tap. The world wasn't silent, but it felt like everything was waiting. Maddie wet her lips. Her throat tightened. That invisible, heavy hand, the one that had gripped her voice for months, clamped down again. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her chest trembled, like the words wanted to rise but were shoved back down by the memory of that night. Caleb night. The yelling, the crash, the shadows. Her scream that never fully left her lungs. Her breath hitched. Her fingers twitched toward her sleeves. Coda stood up, not abruptly, not dramatically, just a slow, solid rise, stepping close enough for his fur to brush her arm. A reminder. You're here. I'm here. Try again. Maddie's fingers curled into his coat, gripping, steadying. She looked down at him like he was the only solid thing left in a world full of cracks. Her breathing slowed. In, out, in, out. Matching his. Whenever you're ready, Huxley said softly. Maddie pulled in one long breath that shook at the end. Then, finally, she tried again. It barely counted as sound, just air stumbling over itself. She swallowed hard and pushed once more. See? Her voice cracked, audibly, and she froze, eyes wide, like she'd broken some rule by letting noise escape. Coda sat, instantly. No hesitation, no confusion, just boom, down on his haunches, tail swishing once against the ground. Like he'd been waiting for that voice, listening for it in the silence. Like he'd just found the piece of her she thought she lost forever. Maddie gasped. Not a frightened gasp. The opposite. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes filling with shock, relief, and something she hadn't felt in months. Pride. You did that, Huxley whispered, voice thickening. That was you, Maddie. Not me. Not therapy. Not coaxing. You. Maddie didn't answer. Still couldn't. But she crouched beside Coda and buried both hands in his fur. Her tiny forehead rested against his shoulder as she breathed him in. Warm, earthy, real. Her first word since the nightmare. Not whispered in fear. Not cried in desperation. Not ripped out by panic. A choice. Her choice. And Coda followed it perfectly. For the first time since her world shattered, something inside Maddie aligned. A puzzle piece clicking into place. One word. One dog. One moment. And everything shifted. And the crazy thing is, you'd think that after hearing her own voice again, even one tiny word, Maddie would walk into the next court session a little stronger, a little steadier, like, yeah, okay, I can do this. But nope. That's not how trauma works. One victory doesn't erase months of fear. So by the time late afternoon rolled around and they were back inside that courtroom, Maddie was small again, wrapped tight inside her silence, clutching the sleeve of her hoodie like it was a rope she could hold in case the world tried pulling her under. The light was different this time. Not that harsh, freezing morning glare. This was golden hour, long, warm beams of sun cutting across the room like they were trying to comfort her. But even golden sunlight can feel useless when someone like Victor Marlowe is standing in the center of the room. God, this man. He had a talent, not the good kind, the dangerous kind. He stood with perfect posture, one hand resting casually on the defense table, voice smooth as warm honey, except honey doesn't normally taste like poison. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, tone soft enough to sound sincere, loud enough to leave no corner untouched. "What we're seeing here isn't abuse. It isn't violence, it's heartbreak. Nothing more." Heartbreak, yeah. He actually used that word. The jury leaned in a little. They always did when Victor spoke. He had that charisma, the kind that made you follow his voice even when you didn't want to. He gestured toward Caleb Rowan, sitting stiffly in his suit. Caleb lowered his head, doing the whole sad father performance. Victor placed a comforting hand on Caleb's shoulder, like some grieving pastor instead of a shark in a tailored suit. "This man," Victor continued, "is a father who loves his daughter, a father who would never hurt her." The words floated through the air, pretty, polished, sticking to the walls like sugar-coated lies. Maddie's heartbeat tipped sideways. She stared at her shoes, her hands, a crack in the wood of the witness stand. Anything to avoid looking at her father pretending to be a saint. Victor kept going, and going, and going. "Children are imaginative," he said, with a sympathetic smile. "Sometimes they misunderstand. Sometimes they exaggerate. Sometimes—" He lowered his voice, milking the moment. "Fear makes them confused." Confused. There it was, the word used to erase her over and over again. Maddie didn't cry, didn't shake, didn't move. She folded inward, quietly, invisibly, like someone had sucked the air out of her tiny lungs. Victor took a slow step forward, shoes clicking softly on the marble. He spoke with that rhythm lawyers learn somewhere between law school and selling their souls. Each sentence snapped neatly into the next. Each phrase crafted to sound like truth, even when it wasn't. "You must ask yourselves," he said gently, "why a loving father would suddenly be painted as a monster. Why a little girl, who has no history of speaking up, would claim something so terrible." He shrugged, a tiny, calculated shrug. "Fear," he said simply. "Fear creates stories." And Maddie, yeah, she felt every word landing like blows. Coda did too. He lay beside her chair, paws stretched forward, chest rising in slow, heavy breaths. But his eyes, those warm, steady eyes, were locked on Victor Marlowe like lasers. Not angry, not wild, just aware. Studying him, tracking him. Like a soldier recognizing an enemy long before the battle starts. Every time Victor moved, Coda's gaze followed. Smooth, unbroken, patient. A predator watching another predator. Victor kept piling on the lies, layer after layer, painting Caleb as a victim, painting Maddie as confused, painting the truth as flimsy and flawed. This case, he said, spreading his hands like a gift, is nothing more than miscommunication, a story twisted by fear, a moment misunderstood by a child whose emotions overwhelmed her. He turned just enough for sunlight to hit his profile. Perfect timing, perfect manipulation. Jury members nodded. Spectators murmured. Someone sighed sympathetically. And Maddie sat there, swallowing every ounce of helplessness she'd been carrying for months. She wasn't imagining anything. She wasn't confused. She wasn't a liar. But when everyone around you believes the wrong story, staying silent starts feeling safer than being wrong again. Her hands balled into fists inside her sleeves. Her throat tightened. Her vision blurred. Not from tears, but from that old, suffocating shame crawling back in. Then Coda moved. Just a tiny shift. His tail brushed Maddie's shoe. Soft, warm, grounding, as if he was saying, I see him too. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. Victor kept talking, and lying, and twisting. But for the first time since the trial began, Maddie didn't fold all the way inward. Because even though she couldn't use her voice yet, Coda was watching the man who took it from her. Watching him closely, patiently, dangerously. And something in the air, something invisible, shifted. Not enough for Victor to notice. Not yet. But enough to promise that eventually, every lie he stacked today was going to come crashing down. If Victor Marlowe's lies had wrapped the courtroom in a thick, choking fog, then what happened next? Yeah, that was the spark that set the whole thing on fire. The room went still, not quiet, still. The kind of stillness where even air molecules seem scared to move. Late sunlight drifted across the floor in long golden streaks, catching dust like tiny frozen sparks. People shifted in their seats, but gently, afraid any sound might break something delicate. And in the middle of it all, Maddie sat small and tense, hands squeezed inside her sleeves, Coda pressed close against her leg. Victor Marlowe stepped forward, slow, measured, too calm to be innocent. It was the kind of walk you only see from people who think they're untouchable. Heels clicking softly on marble, suit jacket perfectly still. He gave the judge a polite smile, gave the jury a softer one, gave the audience a humble nod. Like he was some kind of saint delivering comfort. But then, he turned toward Maddie. His whole face changed. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough. The shift, the drop of the mask, the curl at the corner of his mouth pretending to be a smile. He walked right up to her. Hey, kiddo, he murmured, voice dipped in fake honey. Rough day, huh? I just want to make sure we're okay. The jurors watched, tilting their heads like, aw, what a good man. But Maddie's stomach twisted. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Victor crouched down. Too close. Close enough that his cologne forced its way into her lungs. Close enough that she could feel his breath on her cheek. And then, very casually, he turned his head toward Coda. His voice dropped to a razor-thin whisper. Move again. A pause. A smile that wasn't a smile. And I'll have you put down tonight. You hear me, mutt? The word mutt left his mouth like a slur. Maddie jerked, just for a second, fear flashing across her face. Coda froze. Not scared. No. This was the freeze of a warrior who just heard the emotional equivalent of a trigger being pulled. Muscles locked. Eyes sharpened. Ears tilted forward. Breath low. Slow. Ready. But he didn't growl. Didn't snap. Didn't bare his teeth. A normal dog might have. But Coda wasn't normal. He was trained, disciplined, built for precision, not chaos. He didn't move an inch. But the energy around him shifted, heavy, electric, like a thunderstorm forming inside a single heartbeat. Maddie felt it first. The tension, the swell, the quiet power coiled under fur and bone. Her fingers tightened in her sleeve. Her eyes flicked to Coda, terrified he might lunge, terrified he might get hurt. But he stayed, immovable, unshaken. A mountain in the shape of a dog. And Victor, oh, he loved that. He leaned in, whispering venom soft enough to hide behind kindness. One bark, one move, one sound, and you're done. But Victor forgot one tiny detail. Coda wasn't alone. Under the thick fur on his neck, right beneath the collar, something faint pulsed. A tiny red light. So small no one would notice unless they knew. That pulse? That was the sound-activated micro-recorder switching on. Because Coda wasn't just a retired K-9 hanging around. Sergeant Huxley had kept a piece of his past alive. A tiny device, dormant until it heard a whisper close enough. And Victor's threat? Yeah. It was close enough. The device blinked again. Soft. Steady. Alive. Coda didn't look at it. Didn't acknowledge anything. He just stared straight through Victor Marlowe, memorizing every breath, every shift, every drop of fear scent in his sweat. Victor stood up, rearranged his perfect smile, and walked away like nothing had happened. The jury didn't notice. The audience didn't notice. Even the judge didn't notice. But Maddie did. Her eyes widened, just a flicker, when she saw the tiny blink beneath Coda's fur. Her breath hitched. Her chest tightened in disbelief, because for the first time, for the very first time since this nightmare began, she saw proof. Real proof. Proof that didn't require her voice, because she didn't have one. Coda had it. Coda was holding her truth, right there beneath his fur. And when Victor walked away, Coda leaned, just slightly, brushing Maddie's knee with his shoulder. Not an accident, not a mistake, a promise. I heard him, and so will everyone else. The courtroom didn't know it yet. Victor didn't know it yet. Hell, even the judge didn't know it yet. But the warrior inside Coda was awake. And once a warrior wakes up, he doesn't go back to sleep. And the wild part? After that threat, after those 6 poisoned words Victor whispered into Coda's ear, you'd think the tension couldn't get any thicker. But it did. It sank into the room, heavy and invisible, like someone had pulled a dark curtain over everyone except the 3 who knew what really happened. Victor thought he'd won. He always did. People like him mistake silence for surrender. So when he stood up for his final argument, he strutted to the center of the courtroom like he was walking onto a Broadway stage. His voice slipped back into that fake velvet tone, all syrup and sympathy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, spreading his arms with a humble gesture that wasn't humble at all. "Let's take a moment to truly understand the heart of this case." He paced slowly, deliberately, performing like a man who practiced his expressions in the mirror every night. "You've seen a frightened child," he continued. "You've seen her trembling, her silence, her confusion, and your hearts naturally ache for her." Some jurors nodded. A few clasped their hands. Someone sighed. Victor smiled. Small, tender, calculated. But heartbreak isn't the same as truth. He placed a hand over his chest like a saint delivering scripture, and people ate it up. Maddie sat still, hands twisted together, head bowed. From her seat, his voice felt like it was dripping from the ceiling instead of coming from his mouth. But Coda wasn't looking at his face anymore. He was watching Victor's mouth, every movement, every lie. Victor pressed on, warming into his favorite topic, himself. "I stand before you not to villainize a child, far from it, but to defend an innocent man." He gestured to Caleb Rowan. Caleb lowered his head, pretending to cry. Pathetic, but effective. Victor inhaled, savoring the drama, and lowered his voice to a near whisper. "In a moment of fear, a child can imagine almost anything." He paused. Perfect timing, perfect manipulation. He had the jury. He had the room. He thought he had the truth crushed under his dress shoe. And Maddie? She felt everything inside her squeeze tighter, ribs caving inward like her body was trying to shield her heart. And then it happened. A sound. Small. Soft. Completely out of place. A giggle. Maddie giggled. Not a joke giggle. Not nervous laughter. It was sharp, like a breath that had been trapped too long and finally escaped with a crack. It sliced through Victor's speech like a blade through silk. Every head snapped toward her at the same instant. Jurors froze. Spectators leaned forward. Even the judge stopped mid-blink. And Victor? He stopped dead. Half step, half word, half breath. His face twisted, confusion, anger, and something he'd never admit. Fear. Maddie didn't look at him. Didn't look at anyone. She stared straight ahead, a tiny smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth, just enough to make her eyes spark for the first time in months. Because that giggle? It wasn't joy. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't random. It was the sound of a secret, a victory she hadn't spoken aloud, a truth she didn't need to say. She giggled because Victor's threat, his whisper dripping with cruelty, wasn't just between them anymore. It was recorded. Every syllable, every toxic breath, every disgusting promise. Hidden right beneath Coda's fur. She knew it. Coda knew it. Huxley knew it too, though he kept his expression stone still. Time seons. But Victor had no idea. He tried to recover, cleared his throat, adjusted his sleeve, forced his smile back into place. But there was a tremble in his hand now. As I was saying, but the spell he cast was broken. The jury wasn't leaning in anymore. They were staring at Maddie, wondering why a terrified child just laughed. Victor felt the shift. Panic flickered behind his eyes. He rushed his next lines, losing rhythm, losing control. And Coda? He didn't blink. He just watched Victor unravel, piece by arrogant piece. Maddie sat still, hands in her lap, eyes bright with something new. Power. Not loud, not spoken, but real. She wasn't the girl crumbling under his words anymore. She was the girl holding the truth like a hidden blade. A truth Victor didn't even know was pointed at his throat. The courtroom buzzed, not with noise but with tension. People sensing a shift they didn't understand yet. Victor's confidence cracked. His voice quivered. The mask slipped. All because a little girl giggled. So let me ask you, and be honest. 1. Do you feel chills? 2. Do you feel proud of her? 5. Or 6. Do you wish you could have seen Victor's face up close the moment he realized something was very, very wrong? If Maddie's little giggle cracked the surface of Victor Marlowe's perfect performance, then what came next? Yeah, that was the earthquake that split the room open. Everything happened fast and slow, in that strange way where time feels like it just trips over itself. Right after Maddie laughed, Victor tried to continue, tried to tie his lies into one last pretty bow, but the rhythm was gone. He stumbled over his next line, cleared his throat twice, shot a quick, panicked glance toward Caleb Rowan like he needed backup. Caleb just stared at him, confused, like even he felt something was off. And in the back row, Sergeant Blake Huxley sat up a little straighter. He wasn't looking at Victor. Coda. He was looking at Coda. Specifically, the faint blink of red beneath Coda's fur. Huxley's hand slipped into his jacket pocket. And honestly, if anyone had been watching him in that exact second, they would have known something huge was coming. But nobody was. All eyes were on Maddie, or on the man unraveling in real time. The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Marlowe, if you're finished, yes, Your Honor, yes. The defense rests." He sat down too fast. His chair scraped the floor. A few people flinched. Then the prosecutor rose, calm, steady, with that quiet, dangerous confidence only seasoned lawyers have. "Your Honor," she said, glancing back at Huxley, "the state has a supplemental piece of evidence." Victor's head snapped toward her. "Objection! This wasn't disclosed." "It was," she interrupted smoothly. "You simply weren't listening." Victor's jaw went slack, and Huxley finally stood. He walked toward the center of the courtroom with slow, deliberate certainty, like each step anchored the whole room. Time. In his hand was a small black remote. One button. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. But powerful enough to end a man's career. The judge nodded. "You may proceed." The room held its breath. Huxley didn't make a speech, didn't explain, didn't preface. He just pressed the button, click. At first, nothing. Just a faint rustle from the speakers. Then, Victor Marlowe's voice filled the courtroom. "You move again. I'll have you put down tonight." The room exploded in gasps. This wasn't the polished Victor, not the charming one, not the silver-tongued one. This was the real one. Cold, venomous, monster-shaped. Then the next part. "This dog is trash." Someone whispered, "Oh my God." A juror shook her head, mouthing, "That's him. That's really him." Victor shot to his feet. That's fake. Fabricated. Your Honor." The judge slammed his gavel. "Silence." But the recording wasn't done. Huxley pressed the button again. Victor's voice returned, sharper, uglier, dripping with cruelty. "You say one more word, and I'll kill it in front of you." Kill it. Not him. Not the dog. It. The courtroom froze. Silence alive and deadly. Maddie's face crumpled. Her eyes, wide, wet, locked onto Coda. Because finally, she didn't have to convince anyone. Didn't have to speak. Didn't have to fight. The truth had spoken for her. Her breath broke. Shoulders shook. Then her whole body collapsed into sobs. Raw, loud, uncontrollable sobs that had been trapped inside her since the night. Her whole world shattered. Not fear. Relief. Coda curled into her. A shield of fur and loyalty. Breathing slow. Grounding her breath by breath. The jury stared at Victor like he was something rotten. The prosecutor's eyes burned. Even Caleb Rowan sagged backward, all the fake grief melting off his face. Victor tried one last swing. That could be anybody's voice." Huxley finally spoke, deep, calm. It's yours. The device is department property. The recording is time-stamped. Chain of custody protected. Victor deflated. Right there. In front of everyone. The prosecutor folded her arms. "Well, Mr. Marlowe," she said, voice sharp as glass. "Looks like the dog you threatened just testified." A ripple burst through the courtroom. Shock, awe, fury, satisfaction, all colliding in one electric moment. And in the center of it all, Maddie held on to Coda, tears soaking into his fur, while the world finally heard her truth. Through him, through her dog, her warrior, her voice. If the recording was the spark, then what happened next was the explosion. The kind of explosion that doesn't just shake a room, it flips it upside down. Victor Marlowe's voice, that ugly, venom-soaked whisper, still hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. The courtroom froze, completely, utterly. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody even blinked. Except Maddie. She was crying into Coda's fur, her small shoulders shaking so violently it looked like she might fold in half. But these tears weren't quiet. They weren't hidden. They were real, raw, loud enough to fill every corner that had once ignored her. And Coda? Yeah, he stayed right there, pressed into her side, steady as a heartbeat, steady as a mountain, like he was carved from something ancient and unbreakable. Victor, on the other hand, oh boy. He looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him while he was still pretending he could fly. His skin went chalk white. His perfect hair suddenly didn't look so perfect. His lips moved, but no sound came. Just twitching shapes, scrambling for a lie strong enough to save him. Spoiler, there wasn't one. The judge stood so fast his robe billowed like a storm front. "Mr. Marlowe," he thundered, "approach the bench." Victor staggered, legs wobbling like they'd forgotten how knees worked. Your Honor, I can The gavel slammed. Crack! Enough! Victor flinched like he'd been struck. "In my 32 years on this bench," the judge growled, "I have never witnessed behavior so manipulative, so disgraceful, so violently unethical." His eyes cut toward the bailiffs. "Take him into custody." Victor shattered. "No, no, wait!" he shouted, stumbling backward. "This is illegal. That recording. She, the dog. This is all." But no one cared. No one even looked at him. 2 bailiffs seized him, dragging him toward the aisle. He twisted, fought, snarled like a cornered animal. "Don't touch me! Do you know who I am?" Someone in the gallery muttered, "Unfortunately." A ripple of dark laughter spread. The judge slammed the gavel again. "Victor Marlowe, you are hereby remanded for witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and professional misconduct bordering on criminal assault." Victor's eyes bulged. "This is a mistake. Let go of me." But then, click, click. The cuffs closed on his wrists. And that was the moment everything broke open. The crowd didn't just react. They erupted. Applause exploded through the room, fierce, emotional, like the entire building had been holding its breath for months and finally exhaled. Some people stood. Some cried. Some clapped so hard their palms turned red. But the person everyone was watching wasn't Victor. It was Maddie. Gasps rippled when she lifted her face from Coda's fur. Eyes wet, cheeks streaked with tears, but glowing with something new. Relief. Her shoulders sagged. 100-pound weight lifted off her small frame. She blinked, dazed, fragile, like she wasn't sure any of this was real. But she didn't let go of Coda. Not for a second. Coda shifted, sitting even closer. Chest rising slow, steady, grounding her breath for breath. He looked calm, almost serene. Like justice wasn't dramatic for him. Just a job he happened to be incredibly good at. The judge stared at him with something between awe and respect. "This dog," he said softly, "has done more for the truth today than the man sworn to defend it." Another wave of applause. Louder, stronger. Victor's shouts grew fainter as the bailiffs dragged him out, like a bad smell finally being carried far away. And the courtroom, the same courtroom that once felt like a cage, suddenly felt warm, alive, hopeful. Maddie leaned into Coda again, breathing him in. She wasn't shaking anymore. And Coda? He didn't puff up, didn't pose, didn't act heroic. He just sat there, eyes steady, calm, unshakable. A statue of loyalty. A monument of justice with fur instead of stone. If anyone had walked in right then, they would have whispered exactly what the gallery murmured under their breath. That dog saved her. And honestly, he did. Not just with the recording, not just with the threat, but by staying. By being the one solid thing in a world that tried to shatter a little girl. And honestly, after watching Victor Marlowe dragged out of that courtroom like a busted firework, you'd think the world would just snap back into place. You'd think Maddie would feel fixed, or healed, or whatever people like to print on motivational posters. But that's not how hearts work, especially little ones. Later that week, when the dust settled and the courthouse whispers finally faded, Maddie stood behind the K9 station. A quiet yard, stubborn patches of grass, sunlight softer than anywhere else. The kind of place where things ended gently. Sergeant Blake Huxley was there, hands in his pockets, staring out toward the pines like he didn't know where to put his feelings. The man looked nervous, which was weird. He never looked nervous. Coda sat beside him, relaxed, calm, like he already understood everything that was about to happen. Maddie walked toward them, tiny backpack bouncing, eyes still red from everything she'd lived through. Trauma doesn't disappear just because justice finally shows up. It lingers, hides in corners. But today wasn't about fear, or courtrooms, or recordings. It was about goodbye. Or maybe not goodbye. Something softer. Something in between. Huxley cleared his throat. "Hey, kiddo," he murmured. "We, need to talk about Coda." Maddie stiffened, dread crawling up her spine. Huxley lifted both hands. "No, no, nothing bad. Just official stuff." She waited. "Coda's retiring," he said softly. "For good this time." The words floated between them, warm, heavy, final. Maddie didn't cry, didn't speak. She simply moved closer and brushed her hand against Coda's shoulder, as if confirming he was still real. Coda leaned into her instantly. Huxley crouched, pulling something small and metallic from his vest pocket. "I figured you should do this part," he said. The recorder. The tiny device clipped beneath Coda's collar. The one that had changed everything. Its little red light. Dead now. Silent. Huxley held it out. "You want to take it off?" Maddie nodded. Her fingers, trembling, reached for it like she was touching something sacred. She unclipped it. Click the final one. And suddenly, Coda wasn't a police dog anymore. Not an officer. Not a witness. Not evidence, just Coda. Her Coda. She turned the tiny device in her hands, studying the scratches, the dent on the casing. It had protected her long before she even knew it existed. Huxley reached into his pocket again. Something silver, polished, new. A tag. A single word engraved. Home. If anyone should give him his new identity, Huxley said gently, "It's you." Maddie knelt, hands shaking, and clipped the new tag onto Coda's collar where the recorder used to be. The metal chimed, bright, soft, like a promise. "There," she whispered, voice cracking. "Now you're not a police dog anymore." Coda tilted his head and nudged her chest, gentle, steady, perfect. Maddie's breath broke. And then, everything inside her gave out. She threw her arms around him, burying her face in the soft fur around his neck. Her shoulders shook, her hands clung, her sobs poured out like a storm she'd held in for months. "You don't have to talk," she cried. "You never did. You just have to stay. You were there when nobody else was. You were brave for me. And you don't have to be brave anymore. Just be with me." Coda pressed his head into her shoulder. The same slow, steady pressure from the first day they met. From the courtroom. From every moment he saved her without a single word. And in that quiet yard behind the K9 station, Maddie wasn't the girl who'd been ignored, or doubted, or broken. She was just a kid hugging her best friend. Huxley turned away, blinking hard, pretending he had something in his eye. "You two saved each other," he said softly. The tag on Coda's collar swung gently in the breeze. Home. A new chapter. A new identity. A new life. Not as Officer Coda. Not as evidence. but as the heartbeat Maddie chose to trust. And honestly, that was the only retirement he ever wanted. And it's funny. You'd think moments like that, those big, life-changing, heart-shaking moments, would fade with time. But they don't. They stick. They stay. They settle somewhere deep in your bones and grow up with you. 15 years later, Maddie Rowan learned that better than anyone. She pulled into the gravel lot of Sierra Oaks K9 Memorial Garden just as late morning sunlight slipped through the clouds. Warm, golden, the kind of sunlight that feels like it remembers you. She stepped out of her car, smoothing the front of her navy cardigan, the way people do when they're walking into a place their heart isn't fully ready for. Her hair, longer now, darker, blew across her face in the wind. She tucked it behind her ear, fingertips trembling just a little. She wasn't 8 anymore. She wasn't small, or silent, or scared. At 23, Maddie had grown into someone steady, grounded, gentle in that quiet, healing way that made kids trust her in under 30 seconds. She worked as a child therapist now, the kind who kept dog treats in her pockets, because sometimes the therapy dogs needed comfort more than the kids. But today, she wasn't the therapist. She wasn't the professional. She wasn't the woman shaped by knowledge or training. Today, she was the girl shaped by a dog. The garden path curved beneath her feet, stones warm from the sun. Rows of white granite markers lined both sides, each name carved deep and proud. Partners who had served and protected before crossing whatever bridge dogs cross when they're done being heroes. The air smelled like pine and sun-warmed earth. Birds sang somewhere high in the redwoods. Leaves shifted overhead like soft applause. Maddie walked slowly, eyes scanning the markers until she saw it. His name. Coda loyal partner. Protector. Family. Her breath caught. Not painfully, just enough to remind her of everything this one name contained. She knelt in front of the stone, knees pressing into soft grass. Her hand reached out, tracing every carved letter like she was memorizing it all over again. The stone was cool, steady, permanent in a world where almost nothing had been. "Hey, boy," she whispered. Her voice cracked, the same way it always did when she talked to him. "I'm here." She slipped a hand into her pocket and pulled out a small, silver tag, the one she'd taken from his collar 15 years ago, the one that swung between his shoulders every step he took after retiring. Home. She placed it gently at the base of the stone, pressing it into the grass so the wind wouldn't take it. "There," she murmured. "Back where it belongs." A warm breeze lifted her hair, brushing across her cheek like a familiar hand she'd once known. "People always ask me why I chose this job," she whispered. "Why I work with hurting kids. Why I sit in rooms that feel too quiet." She shook her head softly. "I never give them the real reason." Her palm pressed to the stone. Cold, solid, steady. It's because of you. A tear slipped down her cheek. She let it fall. You didn't just save me once, Coda. You taught me to breathe again, to trust again, to stand without shaking. You didn't save me in a moment. You saved me my whole life. Silence settled, not empty, but full of echoes. Footsteps she remembered, warm fur against her cheek, a steady breath that once matched hers when she could barely breathe at all. She sat back in the grass, knees pulled up, letting the sun soak into her skin. And somewhere, maybe memory, maybe something more, she could almost hear it. That deep, calm coda breath. In, out, in, out. Maddie smiled, soft, small, beautifully broken. You're still my home, she whispered. A gust of wind danced through the redwoods, sunlight scattering across the stone, leaves fluttering like 100 tiny flags saluting a soldier long gone but never forgotten. She stayed there a while, long enough for the sun to shift, long enough for peace to settle in the places grief used to live. Because grief, when it's tied to love that deep, stops hurting the same way. It becomes quieter, softer, something like gratitude wearing the clothes of sadness. And sitting there at Coda's name, Maddie felt something she hadn't felt in years. Whole. And honestly, after sitting in the quiet grass with Coda's name beneath her fingertips, Maddie thought she'd already felt the hardest part of the day. She thought the heaviest emotions had come and gone. Turns out, she was wrong. Because a few hours later, she found herself standing at the edge of the Sierra Oaks Amphitheater, watching rows of people gather for the annual K-9 Remembrance Ceremony. The fall air was cool, but gentle, smelling faintly of pine and something sweet. Maybe the cider stand someone had set up at the entrance. The trees around the clearing glowed gold and red, their leaves rustling with that soft whisper only autumn can make. Sunlight trickled through the branches in scattered beams, brushing the engraved stones lined neatly across the meadow. Names, hundreds of them, each one a story, each one a sacrifice. And somewhere among them, Coda. Maddie tightened her fingers around the small note card she'd brought. She didn't need it, but holding something made her hands feel less empty. You ready, Maddie? The voice was gentle. She turned to see Officer Huxley, grayer now, slower moving, but still carrying that quiet strength he always had. As I'll ever be, she whispered. He squeezed her shoulder. He'd be real damn proud of you. The ceremony began with a moment of silence, then the reading of names, then a violin piece so soft and aching that even the toughest officers wiped their eyes. And then her name was called. Please welcome Maddie Rowan. A ripple passed through the crowd. Some knew who she was, some didn't. But all of them turned toward the small wooden podium beneath the towering oak. She climbed the steps, steady, even though her heart felt anything but. Hi, she began, her voice quiet but clear. I'm not great at speeches, so just bear with me. A few soft chuckles eased the air. She inhaled. I used to think heroes had to be loud, brave in obvious ways, charging into danger, fighting the bad guys, big dramatic stuff. She shook her head slowly. But the first hero who saved me didn't bark. She looked toward the stones. He didn't speak. He didn't make a sound unless he had to. Her breath wavered, but she didn't break. He just listened. The wind brushed her hair like it agreed. Coda listened to my breathing when it shook. He listened to my silence when I couldn't find words. He listened to every fear, every nightmare, every piece of me that didn't make sense to anyone else. A tear slipped down. She let it fall. And when no one believed me, he did. When I couldn't say the truth, he recorded it. When I couldn't find my heartbeat, he gave me his. She saw people quietly wiping tears. Strong people, soft people, parents, officers, kids. There are heroes in this world who don't wear uniforms, heroes who don't need words, heroes who just show up, sit close and listen. And some heroes, she whispered, stay with us long after they're gone. Maddie stepped away from the podium, walking to Coda's marker in the front row. The sunlight caught his name, making it gleam like silver. She knelt, laying a hand over the tag she'd brought. Thank you. Her voice trembled. You didn't save me in a moment. You saved me my entire life. A hush fell over the amphitheater, a kind of reverent awe. Maddie returned to the podium. Before I go, I just want to say this. She scanned the crowd, families holding flags, officers gripping old collars, children hugging stuffed dogs the way she used to. Never underestimate what a dog can heal, or what a child can survive, or how powerful it is when the two of them find each other. Her voice softened. A child's laughter didn't ruin a courtroom that day. She looked toward the sky, tears shining in sunlight. It shattered a lie. The audience slowly rose, first in silence, then applause, soft, then stronger, then overwhelming. Wind swept through the stones, brushing metal tags together in a gentle chime. Like every dog honored there was clapping with them. And Maddie, standing in the center of it all, felt whole. Not healed, not fixed, just whole. And now, let me ask you something with complete sincerity. If it were you, standing in front of hundreds of heroic dog memorials, would you feel peace, pride, or something deeper, an emotion too big for a name?